Hey everyone, we're back with the second, not quite second season or whatever of this GoPod, whatever it is. Because I don't remember how many episodes we did before we went on a long hiatus.
We're about 30 or so. This is actually the second recording now because I fucked up the first one. So we're going to use the same jokes, but they'll be less funny now because we know how they end.
Well, we know, but you don't.
I bump pause, so I'm a bad person. I was
Yes, you
talking.
are.
I don't know. I mentioned something about how attractive Naaman was, and I got just lost in his eyes thinking about them.
If only.
And there we go. And now it's awkward again. Let's talk about
Yes.
other things. Let's talk about things that happened during this week, which I just mentioned a second ago, but it is worth bearing repeating that Naaman couldn't think of. I had to find topics for him because he's lazy. Lazy.
Promise, I'm not the newsy
So
person.
lazy.
Shut up, you.
All right, let's
All right, Mr. Smartass, let's start with
be
your topics then.
professionals. Let's be professionals and talk about things that people pay money for.
Or anything but.
Because they're listening to this right now, or at least I assume they are. They're in the future. All right. So probably the most interesting thing, I think at least, that happened in the last couple of weeks was that last week. When I say last week, I mean 2 weeks ago. But regardless, we were talking about Mass Effect Andromeda, and aside from what a steaming pile of dog shit that it is, we're talking about the fact that, or at least I mentioned, that there was no DLC for it yet, so I thought that was a positive sign. I thought that meant that BioWare were sort of sitting in their little troll cave where they live, just polishing them gems, waiting to get them out to us, and hopefully have an improved product. Turns out that's not exactly the case.
Nope, it seems that it's just going on the shelf for now.
That's it. So what it is now is that BioWare Montreal, who are the developers who made Andromeda, which, as I said, I mentioned before, so I won't go into again, have been downsized somewhat dramatically, and the Mass Effect property has basically been mothballed for now. It hasn't been cancelled, but it's basically just been put on hiatus indefinitely. Which, I don't know, that's a very dramatic step, don't you think? That's really hitting the nuclear option straight away, I think.
Something tells me that was more of an EA decision than straight up a BioWare one.
Yeah.
Because
The thing
as we all know, games are not cheap to make these days, and Mass Effect costs a lot of money to make. So, it didn't do as well as they had hoped, and it was kind of critically panned. So, guess we're just not going to do it anymore.
yeah, but it wasn't.
Suffers the same fate. Suffers the same fate as like Mirror's Edge and stuff.
Well, the thing is, though, it wasn't a bad game though. It was just, I say, seeming pile of dog shit. I was being dramatic. It wasn't a bad game. It was just incredibly average. It was a straight. I said 6.5 when I 6.5. If I was feeling really generous, I might give it a 7.
And as we've gone over probably in other places before, that sometimes an average game is worse than a straight up bad one.
That's true, but I mean, if you look at other examples, there's been plenty of franchises that have released mediocre games in the past. I mean, Call of Duty obviously being a prime example of this. Future Warfare? What the hell is the current one right now? Yeah, that hasn't already stopped them
That was Advanced Warfare, and
yeah.
I think the difference there is that it's a lot.
There's Advanced Warfare, and then there's another one after that, which was even further in the future. But regardless, the point is that one got savaged by fans because they're just like, no, this is too far in the future. This is too silly. We can't take this seriously. And they're like, okay, great. Next one's World War II.
I think that the difference is that ultimately first-person shooters, after all this time, are stupid easy to make. Because let's be honest, is most of the coding and gameplay is just copy-paste from year to year.
I mean, yes, there are a lot of I mean, obviously, I'm no game developer, so I don't know specifically. Mechanically, they're obviously less complicated than something like a role-playing game. But there's still, I've played.
Oh no, I'm not saying it's super easy. I'm just saying that it's much easier to take a hit on something like that and continue with it because ultimately a lot of it is just the same as the previous one.
There's still a lot of polish that goes in those games, though. They still do look graphically very competent, and mechanically, they still feel very good to play, even though I'm not a fan of the genre at all, really. So, yeah, obviously, as I said, it's different. It's comparing apples and oranges, sure, but I still think there's something relevant to say about that. But like I said, it seems very dramatic to just go, okay, here's a franchise like Mass Effect, which has made us absolutely, I assume, a lot of fucking money because it is a very popular franchise. Sure, it's not a very cost-effective type of game to make because there is a lot of time that needs to go into it. There's a lot of resources, things like that. But to just go, no more Mass Effect for you, fine. Seems, like I said, it seems like hitting the nuclear button.
Unfortunately, that's kind of how things tend to work these days.
Yeah, so I mean, that could very well be the end of Mass Effect, or it could be that we won't see a sequel to Andromeda for several years again. It took 5 years for the fucking sequel to Mass Effect 3 to come out. It's going to take 10 for the next one. So, I mean, they obviously weren't in a hurry to make Andromeda, which is why it took 5 fucking years, because you can take one look at that game and know it didn't take 5 years to
Nope.
develop. So, exactly. So, the question is that why are they so hesitant? We do know, part of what was mentioned in that article regarding the mothballing of the franchise is that the main studio is working on a new IP, which will probably be probably being debuted at E3 this year. So we'll obviously get to see what, I said last time, what the fuck were they working on? Now we'll get to find out what the A team was working on if the B team had to work on Andromeda. So maybe they will be pouring all their resources into that. I don't know, but it just seems if this is the end of Mass Effect as a franchise, it's a very inglorious end. It's very much not with a bang but a whimper, unfortunately.
10 years, you say, as the F-Zero fan. I've been waiting for almost 15 now. So, for another
what?
F-Zero game, so shut up.
I had to wait nearly 10 years for another Mirror's Edge game, so nah. It also was
Yes,
pretty mediocre.
thanks, EA.
That's not it.
But, it's just a
that
weird
was-
thing to just say, okay, we're not doing it anymore. I mean, I think it would have been better if they had announced that after E3 or whatever it is where they would show it. Say, okay, we're working on something new. We're going to put Mass Effect on the back burner for a little bit just to freshen our minds after a lot of people apparently didn't like Andromeda. Fair enough, then.
Yeah, so I mean, well, I mean, I'm not saying it's probably the end of Mass Effect. I'm just saying it could well be, because if they're mothballing it, they could just decide to just forget about it. There is that possibility, or they may come back in, another 5 years, another 10 years, and we'll have another sequel finally. But it just, as I said, it doesn't look good.
Unfortunately, so.
All right, well, that's about all there is to say about that. There's nothing else we can really add to the many levels of diatribe that the internet has spewed towards Mass Effect Andromeda in general. So we'll stop beating that dead horse and move on to a new promo pony instead, called What the Fuck is Nintendo Doing at E3? Because I don't know, but apparently Nairman does, so why don't you tell us, Mr. Smarty
They
Pants?
announced that they're going to be doing their digital presentation again, but of course, unsurprisingly, it's going to be primarily about Switch games coming out this year. It's just one of those, after last year of basically being a no-show, it'll be interesting to see what they do, because it's a very important time for them, especially with the Switch, because got off to a good start, and how do they keep it going the rest of the year?
Well, this is interesting to me because Nintendo has very much kind of doubled down on the philosophy of, we're not going to trade shows, we're not going to TGS, we're not going to anything else like that. We are our own sort of, we make our own types of games, we don't make the types of games that other people play, so we're going to be doing our own presentations when we feel like it, when we see fit. And they've very much cut themselves off from the mainstream kind of media in that regard, and yet here they are going back to E3. So does this speak to how desperate isn't really the word, because they have been making good money on the Switch, I should say, but how eager they are to really push that as hard as they can, essentially?
Probably the eagerness speaks a lot of volumes for it, because the first year for any console is always important to get off to a good start, because it's a lot harder to claw yourself out of a hole than just run in the first place. The interesting thing is that they basically ignored E3 entirely last year. Yes, I know they had a small little thing as a video presentation and Zelda, but even as far as Zelda goes, we were interested in seeing it, of course, but at that point we all knew it was going to be for whatever the new system was back. We didn't know what it was back then. Because we knew it was, it's going to be on the Wii U, but who cares about that? We want to see it on the new system, because that's what we know it's going to be on. So it felt like very much an afterthought. So it's going to be curious to see how they come back to it, especially considering they're not really good at dealing with other people doing stuff at the same time they are.
They like to have the spotlight on themselves. I suppose what's interesting to me is that, as I said, the Switch is making a lot of money. Someone did a comparison week on week with the Switch versus the PS4 launch, and obviously the PS4 is a very successful console. And week on week, up until it's sort of the first month or so, the Switch completely outsold the PS4 in every regard by comparing the two stats. And obviously, Zelda sold very well and things like that. So as long as it's a marathon and not a sprint, I think it'll do very well as a console overall. I think the question then becomes, is that what Nintendo is worried about? Are they worried that they're going to see that precipitous drop-off that they've seen with other consoles in the past, things like the Wii U,
And
etc.?
that's why it's going to be interesting this year at E3, because they kind of have to hit the ground running with it. They can't. I mean, we have ARMS, which I don't particularly care for, coming out soon, and Splatoon too. But other than Mario, which is coming out holiday season, but who knows when that actually will be, considering that's such a vague term. What are they going to do
Yeah.
to fill the time?
Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing. I mean, how's the? I mean, I suppose the real question is that obviously Nintendo has never had a problem developing first party games. The first party games have always been very high quality. They've typically sold very well because they're with those franchises that everyone knows and loves. I mean, the Inklings was really, Splatoon was really the first brand new franchise they've had in how many fucking years, but. How they can't rely on that alone. Obviously, the Wii U proved that's not enough to ship units. So, how are they looking on the third party front?
And that's what we're hoping to see at E3 mostly.
Ah, that's the $64,000
Yes, because
question.
we know there's a few. Probably the only quote unquote big third party game that we know of that's going to be a new thing and not just, oh, EA's releasing FIFA on it, so who cares? But the
Yeah, we're getting
yeah,
Skyrim.
yeah.
That's still a
So
thing.
the only big one I think we have announced so far is Sonic Forces. But that's Sonic the Hedgehog.
Okay.
It's basically just a different kind of Mario. So Sonic always does well on Nintendo, regardless. But
I was gonna say like Sonic is practically a Nintendo IP at this
practically,
point.
yeah. So it's kind of a half.
Okay, so that's the real question that we really need to see a strong lineup. Do you think that not seeing a strong lineup is going to be really indicative of how developers feel about the Switch? Because obviously, we had that discussion, I think it was last time, where I was saying that, again, I'm not a game developer, I don't know, but if you have the choice of developing a game that's going to work on, effectively, at a certain hardware level, it's going to work on the PS4, the Xbox One, and the PC, versus a game that's only going to run on Switch, really, which do you choose? The choice to me would be pretty obvious. What do you think do you think that this will be telling? Do you think this will be a watershed moment, so to speak?
Potentially, it just kind of depends on what they show. Because if they show nothing but ports or very standard things that could easily be downgraded, if we back to FIFA or Madden or whatever, that everyone kind of expects around everything,
Yeah.
then that's a big tell for them. Ultimately, that depends on what they can convince developers to do with the Switch, because I still say the ability to take it on the go wherever you want is a big plus, unless you have a very high-end gaming laptop, which most people
Sure,
do.
but the ability to take it
But
on the
again,
go.
that's just a matter of
But,
how good is Nintendo at selling that to developers.
but the ability to take it on the go isn't really a feature, though. It doesn't change the way the game plays.
No, and we've gone over this, and ultimately, I think that's to the system's benefit.
Yes, but how? Okay, but you're talking about that being a selling point to developers that they need to recognize. Okay, this is the system's big strength. How does that help a developer make a game?
Well, I don't know how the innards of the Switch work, so I can't answer that.
Magnets, how do they work? To use some really outdated memes. Yeah, okay, well, fair enough. I was just curious, genuinely. How do you feel? Obviously it's been a couple months since you've purchased a Switch. How do you feel about the Joy-Cons themselves? Do you feel like, obviously, and this is just a question we weren't really planning this. I'm just curious about this in general. Motion Plus was like not Motion Plus, like the Rumble Plus, sorry, I should say, was like the really big feature. It's like, okay, you can like tell how far you're doing your safe cracking thing or milking a cow or whatever. Is this like having any effect on the way that you play games at all?
HD Rumble, not really, not that I can tell, but I mean, the Joy-Cons work. It's actually kind of fun to just have them separated. I found that I like it better than the shell casing when I'm not having it connected to the system. Like, say, well, I have the Pro controller, so I'm mostly using that, but I'll like kick it on its stand somewhere else and then just have one Joy-Con in each hand and not use the shell, because I can just sit more lackadaisically than try to have my hands close together on a controller.
You can just sprawl out on the ground. Just a bearskin rug of Nair Man just lying
It's one of those
there.
things I didn't think I would actually do, but once I tried, it's like, hey, this is oddly comfortable.
Okay, fair enough. All right, well, that's fair enough. All right, let's move on to other things. Now, this is more rumor than anything else. There's nothing really confirmed about this. But there was a bit of news earlier this week where there was 4 major teams that dropped out of that basically just dropped their Overwatch teams entirely. So we're talking about things like Echo Fox, Evil Geniuses, big esports teams like that. They dropped their Overwatch team components, which is obviously bad news bears for the actual players in those teams. And wasn't really a lot of reasoning surrounding that. Now, word has come out that essentially the reasoning behind it is that the Overwatch Pro circuit is charging a whopping $20 million buy-in for each team to be able to compete. So this is the word. Do you know, is there any more word in this, Snowman?
Not that I've seen when I've looked around for it, just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
So yes, as I can tell,
Yeah.
teams still have to pay $20 million.
Dollars. That's right. You got a little pinky there
Yeah,
at the corner of your mouth. Now, this is obviously a fantastic amount of money in anyone's language, but especially in regards to the esports scene in general, because you look at something like League of Legends, which is not even arguably, it just is the biggest boy on the block right now. There's nothing else that can really compete with League of Legends in terms of viewership, in terms of presence, things like that. And I mean, they're still charging $1.8 million, which is still a lot of fucking money, but it's not 20 goddamn million. So if this is true, and it may well not be, it may not be true. We don't know. But if it is, I mean, this is Blizzard really just saying they're making a statement, I think, here, where they're saying this is going to be bigger than everything. So you either get in on the ground floor or you just get left behind.
I'm curious as how that will actually go, because I was so flabbergasted when I read it. I thought it meant like someone made a typo and thought that the payout was $20 million or something.
Yeah.
It's like you're expecting someone to pay $20 million just to enter?
Just to enter, just for the privilege
and as
of
far
being
as
able to
I
enter.
know, there's no like revenue sharing or kind of Blizzard support in that in case someone loses. It's like, what do you do if you go in and lose all that money? Well, you're just screwed, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, obviously, even if you win a tournament, the prize money is not going to be anything like recouping that. So I suppose you're really I think this is really. This was reported on my ESPN as well, I should say. So ESPN is actually saying this, but I suppose this is really. Is this the moment where they're trying to push esports into the realm of professional sports? Because you look at like your professional sports, like your NBA or your NFL or your hockey or anything else, and 20 million is nothing. That's one bench warmer's paycheck for the year. So that being the case, is this like really their way of trying to force esports into that realm of that kind of money? Is that perhaps what they're trying to do? They're trying to basically by basically forcing everyone to cross this line, really bring them into that realm?
That wouldn't surprise me, the fact that ESPN, of all people, had to break the story, and we all know how much they don't want to cover stuff like games. So that...
I don't think it's so much they don't want to cover it. I think that just the audience is still very reluctant to actually listen to them.
Well, because they clearly have no idea what they're talking about 90% of the time, but...
Exactly, yes. They don't control, like, their audience is still obviously very hardcore old school sports members. They don't consider esports to be any kind of real quote unquote sport.
Says that network that also had, World Tournament of Poker for like hours on end.
No. I'm saying that's
No. I know. I'm just saying in
themselves.
general, but
Yeah. Oh, I mean, look, there's a whole argument to be made there. It's like poker's not a sport. I don't think darts is a sport. I don't think bowling is a sport. But anyway, that's I'm sorry if I've offended darts and bowling players.
all two of you.
Whatever. Sorry, not sorry. So
It might be. It might be
really
the only
I
thing
think
I would
of.
say is that based on the reaction, they would have to kind of make a league licensing sort of thing, kind of like how all the other major sports do, whether it be kind of FIFA or Major League Baseball or whatever. Is that they kind of have safety nets, or they have ways of making sure that one bad tournament or whatever doesn't financially ruin someone. Because the price is too high.
Yeah.
Either they're going to have to lower the price to make sure things are more stable, or they're going to risk a lot of turnover. Which is, of course, never good, because sports are built not so much on the sport, but on the personalities within the sport.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. And that's what I'm saying is that I think that they might be trying to raise the profile of esports as a whole by doing this, because it's just, as I said, it'd be 10 times what League of Legends is trying to do right now. And the thing is that Overwatch just isn't pulling the same kind of numbers that League of Legends is. Granted, it's still pulling very good numbers in terms of a game that's only been a year and a half old, but it's still not there yet. So it's a very interesting decision by Blizzard, and it may well backfire spectacularly. So we'll have to see how this one plays
Blizzard
out.
does Hearthstone too, right? Why
Yeah,
don't
they
they
do.
push Hearthstone card games on ESPN?
Problem with Hearthstone is, and we're going off tangent slightly, but I've actually dropped Hearthstone recently. I used to play it a lot. The latest expansion has just not interested me at all. And the problem is with that, which basically was is that they tried to make Hearthstone very accessible by, and well, this is something we'll get into a little bit later as well with fighting games, but they tried to make it very accessible to players by making a lot of effects very random. That you play a card and you get a random value, or you get a random card draw,
RNG
or
is
you
never
generate
a good
random
idea
card.
for competitive games.
That's right, and the thing is that it's been fine for a while. But the problem, at least in my eyes, as someone who used to be very enthusiastic about the game, would play it every lunch break I had on my mobile phone, and has now dropped it, is because they just with each expansion they doubled down again and again and again on the randomness factor until the point where it's essentially very difficult to have any kind of consistency in the way the deck plays. Because one game it may play spectacularly, one game it may play terribly, and it all comes down to the dice rolls.
Good old Mario Party logic.
I mean, they had a card. Well, they still have a card. They did nerf its effect slightly, but there was a card called Yogg-Saron that, when you played it, would play a random. Upon playing it, would activate a random spell, which was just an effect for every spell that you had played in that game. So you would get 20 random spells in a row the second that you played it, and every effect could be incredibly powerful, could wipe the entire board, it could summon a bunch of monsters, it could buff them all up. It was just an absolute crapshoot. It could take a game that had been very carefully played by one player and turn it on its head because the other one played.
So you're saying you could summon a bunch of monsters in one turn?
Oh, I've summoned a bunch of monsters and seen them all get buffed and just completely annihilate the
But
other
that's
player.
against
So
the
it's
rules, isn't it?
quite ridiculous. Let's not get bogged down in semantics here. The point is that it's a little bit too random, I think, for pro play on something like ESPN, because as much as poker isn't a sport, it's still a game of skill, and there's a lot of skill involved in that. Whereas I feel with each expansion, personally, there is less and less skill involved in Hearthstone and more just dumb fucking luck.
Fair enough. So I guess that's why they're like tripling down on Overwatch then.
Pretty much, yeah. It's the reason I got out of playing. I actually used to play Yu-Gi-Oh a lot in the past, and I used to take that very seriously. And it's the reason I got into fighting games and out of Yu-Gi-Oh, because even Yu-Gi-Oh being a physical card game was still, just the fact that you have to draw a card randomly sort of bothered me. I like games that are just pure skill and nothing
What
else.
does Pot of Greed do?
But draws 2 fucking cards. It's also banned. Now I play my Pot of Greed, which allows me to draw 2 more cards.
Yeah, I know. I play the game too.
I know, it's hard to say in that voice, though.
Anyway, shall we move on before we get...
Before we completely nerd out, let's just move on to the next
Okay.
topic. I used to watch the anime while building decks. Right. Nightwang. Nightwang. So, I know very little about this, so I'm going to be relying on you very much for this particular topic, but from what I understand, there is a new Nightwing comic coming out from DC, obviously, that is like, stop me if you've heard this one before. A character starts to support a totalitarian government with a strategy and an overall regime, which is basically all about racism and treating people, in a dystopian manner in general, and quickly realizes that it wasn't such a great
All I
idea.
can say is thank God they confirmed, like, straight up that it's an Elseworlds tale and it's not canon, so we can all safely ignore it.
It's still going down. It still sounds a little bit Civil War.
Well,
to
it sounds
me.
like a lot of storylines because comics have done this over and over and over again.
That's right. Yes, of course. Red Sun, obviously, being the big one with Superman and
Yeah.
whatnot and things like that. So yeah, so it's an Elseworld story. So that's obviously the reasoning behind it. Do you have any? Is there anything really remarkable about this, or is it just something that people should just
They should just
in
ignore
general?
it because ultimately the choice for making Nightwing do it, good old Dick Grayson, is one of the most confusing things about it, really, more than anything. Because ultimately,
Really,
like,
this is just
Nightwing is probably the most liked character as far as the hero sides go within each other, like, in the entire DC universe. Like, I don't think anyone actively dislikes Dick Grayson. So the idea
okay,
of
fair
him
enough.
kind of going on his own like this and basically finding a way to outlaw and get rid of superpowered people or metahumans or whatever just seems incredibly out of
Mm,
character, even for an Elseworlds tale.
fair enough. Fair enough. But can we just agree for a moment that Jason Todd is actually the best Robin
You're wrong.
out of all of them?
There's not even a debate. You're
as,
just
as,
wrong.
Who is the best Robin then?
Depends on the tone you're going for, but
Yeah.
generally the two are Dick Grayson and Tim Drake.
No Damian Wayne?
Damian Wayne is weird in that he's either really, really well written or he's really, really poorly written.
I see.
There's
There's
kind
no
of
in
no
between
in
on that
between
one.
with Damian, and that's kind of his problem.
Okay, fair enough. As a brief aside, there was a trailer. Obviously, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, which you should, and I'll plug it later on. But there was a reveal for Jason Todd being in Injustice, because we were talking about that last week. That we said, okay, yeah, I'd love this character to be in the game, and obviously Nairman is not as fond of that. So we got talking about all things sort of Robinish. We got Jason Todd as Red Hood, the actual proper Red Hood, not the shitty Joker.
And finally,
Red Hood
give
that
him
he
the
does
old
in Justice.
Joker Jason Todd special.
That's right. You can finally just queue that up and just run it over and over again in training mode. Um, and we got Starfire and we got Sub-Zero. Sub-Zero was obviously a little bit of a no-brainer, considering that Scorpion had been a guest character in the first game, so everyone was already expecting that for Injustice 2. Starfire, honestly, as much as I enjoy the side of female characters in games who are mostly naked, doesn't really do much for me. I think her hair looks very 80s retro. I'm not sure what you think about that.
Well, I mean, her hair up until actually mostly up until the Teen Titans cartoon was always kind of very big and poofy.
Yeah, I mean, but there's a right way to do big and
Yeah,
poofy and a wrong way to do big and poofy. I think they've done it
fair
the
enough.
latter, which is kind of a shame, because I think that one of the reasons I never really liked NetherRealm games until quite recently was that they had a terrible, whoever their artists were for modeling through female characters, they did a terrible fucking job. They always looked very manually. They looked
Those
very
goddamn chins.
ugly. Yeah, like Wonder Woman just looked like a straight up man in the first Injustice. It was all really bad. But finally, with MKX and Injustice 2, they've obviously either fired whoever the fuck was doing that, or hired on some better people, or just changed the way they do it, whatever. And now their female characters are looking really good, which is great. So this is a little bit of a disappointment, because it's not as consistent as the other characters, I think.
Fair enough. Ultimately, I don't think it's ever going to be perfect, but I think generally she looks fine. Just the hair is kind of weird. But getting back to the original topic at hand, I know you're not as
Yeah,
much a comic reader as I am in a sense. So, what's your kind of take
yeah.
on Nightwing being the guy to do, the whole regime thing this time?
I haven't read a whole lot of Nightwing. The only times I've really seen Nightwing in comics has been when he sort of appeared as a guest character in other comics. But from what I have seen, he does seem to be, out of all the Robins that I've seen, out of Jason Todd, out of Damian Wayne, I think that he's the one who's the most kind of Boy Scoutish out of all of them. He's the one who's the most the archetypical sort of good guy character. He's nice, he's friendly, he plays well with everyone. So to have him turn around and just act like a heel, if we're going to use a wrestling term, all of a sudden is very much out of character.
Yeah, so that's kind of my issue with it as well. So, I mean,
Yeah.
we'll see how it
And
comes
just
out,
sort
and
of,
I think a few months is when they're planning it.
yeah. Fair enough. All right, and as this is the last thing about talking about things in Justice and DC, the alternate costumes for DC also got revealed. So we got Professor Zoom. It was me, Barry. It was me
I was
all
the turkey
along.
all along.
We got that. We got fuck. Who's the Green
John
Lantern?
Stewart.
I forget his name. John Stewart. Thank you. Yes, we got John Stewart. We got the classic. We got the Earth 2 Flash, and we got Power Girl. Hooray!
I think we also got Mr.
So
Freeze
I'm
for
all for
Captain
that.
Cold.
We did as well, yes. And also, I've seen screenshots of a Nightwing in the game, so where there may be a alternate skin for Robin in there as well. It was like very poor. It was like someone holding up
Yeah,
their phone
so
to TV. So it was a really
we'll
shitty
see.
screenshot.
We'll see, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll see about that. But there's a possible Nightwing in there as well.
I'm just excited to
But,
play as Captain
yeah,
Cold
fun.
/ Mr. Freeze to just make nothing but cold puns online.
You're not going to do that. We all know that.
Only when I'm playing you.
Oh wait, does this mean that we're gonna throw down? Is
Well,
that
I
what
mean,
you're
we're both
saying?
getting the PS4 version, so why not?
Okay, well there you go. There's going to be a. I didn't know this. I wasn't aware. There's going to be because as far as I knew from all my discussions with you, you were just going to play the story
No,
and nothing
if I'm
else.
getting the game, I might as well
So
play it.
there will be probably on this channel, maybe on my
We'll
channel.
see.
I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out logistics. There will be a very laggy, shitty game of Justice 2
Amazing.
of Nairman versus Red
Amazing.
Gambit. I'll be playing. I'll be.
Just
What's that?
amazing.
What, sorry? Amazing, absolutely. Who are you gonna
I'm
play?
not sure yet.
You're not sure yet? Well, I'll be playing
Well,
Supergirl.
I figured, and Jason Todd whenever
So-
he comes out.
Yeah, and Jason Todd whenever he comes out. So those, but Power Girl is definitely going to be my main. I think from what I've seen of her, I like what she has. She looks like she has a lot of tools for getting around things, which is what I always appreciate with characters. So I think she's going to be a good fit for my style as well. So there's that. So look out for that in future. We'll figure that out. Moving on. Darksiders 3. Were you ever a big fan of the Darksiders series? Did you ever play them? Did you ever indulge in that?
No, not really.
Okay, so this is going to be a short topic. Moving
No,
on.
it's,
No. I've played Darksiders 1 and 2. I haven't finished either of them, actually. I do actually own both of them. The thing that really attracted me to Darksiders as a series was it was done primarily in the art style of Joe Madureira, I think is how you pronounce his last name. You think so? I just call him Joe Mad because it's easier not to embarrass myself that way. But he's a very... If you don't know him, you've probably seen his artwork if you've ever been a fan of comics, especially in the mid to late 90s, where he was a very big artist at Marvel. He's had less of a profile at Marvel since then. I think he's done one or two things for DC.
well, everyone does everything for everyone, so...
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So he's probably done some things there, here and there. But he is basically one of like the great alumni of of comic artists. He's up there with some of the greats. And so I'm not going to rattle off names now because I don't want to embarrass myself for not being able to think of them. But he is basically very highly regarded within the industry. And I think personally that he has it's a very stylized, so it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but it's a very stylized form of art which really appeals to me. I think he's probably my favorite comic artist pretty much of all time, and his art style's really only gotten more detailed and more creative as the years have gone by. So I bought those games essentially just off the back of the fact that he did all the art design for them. He didn't do every asset, but he was basically the lead of the art design.
So you're going to buy Darksiders for the exact same reason?
Well, the problem is that he's not associated with that. He went off and made his own gaming studio. They're currently working on their own game, which name, again, currently escapes me. I should really write these things down before I go into a podcast. But he's not working on it. He's given the game his blessing. He said, look, we wish them all the best. I really hope it does well. I've had a lot of love for Darksiders over the years, obviously. They're still using my designs for some of the characters, but he's not going to have any part of the project. So that's kind of the interesting thing about that. So it still does... From what we've seen a trailer so far, we've seen about 12 minutes of gameplay. It does look like a Darksiders game, but it won't have his hand in it directly, which is a little bit disappointing. That said, I'm still interested in the idea. I'm still interested that this was basically a dead franchise that everyone thought had died when THQ went belly up, but basically it was... some of the devs went off and made their own studio, which was Gunfire Games, and have now obviously been able to pick up this license and continue the story. So I suppose that's the interesting thing about that.
Well, I think the interesting thing is that apparently a bunch of devs had enough money to just go make their own studio and buy a license of a previous franchise. I guess that just shows how in bad state THQ was.
I suspect it would probably be more to do with having investors and things like that rather than having their own money.
Still.
They probably had backers and things like that.
Kickstarter away.
Yeah, it probably would have gone to that if they didn't have some investors. I don't know. I'm throwing shots in the dark here. I don't know if that was the case, but that's my assumption for them to be able to get the money to do this. So I'm definitely interested in this game. I would like to play it. There's nothing really ever been wrong with Darksiders. It's more the fact that I bought both of them on PC, and which is kind of later I discovered that I'm not really much of a PC gamer. I prefer to be, like, as Nearman said before, I prefer to be lounging on my couch playing a game rather than sitting up in front of a PC. So that's kind of really the only reason I like to play fighting games in front of a PC, but that's about it.
No WASD for you?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. And so I'm just too fucking cheap to go and buy them again on console, even though they'd probably be a few bucks by now. But that's not
Shit, it was 99
so
cents.
I'm interested in this. these games, I suppose what's interesting, or what at least should interest you regardless, is that these games are very heavily, not so much aesthetically obviously, but in terms of mechanics, are very heavily inspired by Zelda.
A lot of games like to say they're inspired by Zelda, but
Well, this I can't make direct comparisons because I've never actually played a Zelda game, but from what I've heard, they are very heavily inspired by Zelda. So I mean, I don't know. It's just interesting. I think it was a franchise everyone thought was dead. It's coming back to life now, and yeah, it does still have that aesthetic that I do really like. And yeah, I'd love to hear what people think as well if they are familiar with Joe Mad and perhaps how to pronounce his name properly. But his art style and whatnot. What do they think of his art style? Do they like it? Do they not? Because as I said, it's like art is something. Art is like comedy. It's something that's very personal. Like what one person loves, another person will hate. So, as much as I do love Joe Mad's work, and I do think it looks fantastic, there may well be people who think it looks terrible. So, I'd be interested to hear what people think in the comments below.
sure.
Anyway,
And just depending on how you feel when the game comes out, just let me know. Because if it's, as you say, like Zelda, maybe I'll give it a try.
yeah, fair enough. Well, it's not coming out until 2018 at the earliest, anyway. So, it's a while. It's a ways off yet. We did see some pre-alpha gameplay, but I mean that's pre-alpha, so it was pretty underwhelming because there was no music. There was sound effects that were clearly placeholder sound effects.
So
Things
by
like that.
pre-alpha, you mean they're just playing Ocarina of
was
Time on the stream?
That's it exactly. It was very unpolished, which is what you'd expect from a pre-alpha, but still, that kind of a lot of people were like, oh well, this doesn't look very good. Well, of course it fucking doesn't. It's pre-alpha. What do you
Yep.
expect? But that's neither here nor there, I suppose. It's just an interesting point. Let's go on from there because obviously you don't have much else to say and talk about our final topic, which is accessibility in fighting games. Now, we obviously mentioned accessibility before with the Hearthstoning and whatnot. Accessibility in fighting games has been a sticking point for a very long time. Pretty much, actually, I wouldn't say a very long time. It's only been quite recently. It's really only been Street Fighter Cross Tekken was really the first game I think to try and go down that road of making a game more accessible to newcomers because as much as the FTC is a thing, as much as esports are also a thing, it feels like fighting games are still very much struggling to be able to compete against things like the League of Legends or the Overwatches of the world or anything else like that. So they're trying to bring in more players, and the problem is that fighting games have a very precipitously high learning curve in terms of being able to get into them. So they've tried to make the game more accessible. And we can talk about, would you argue that Smash Bros. Is a game that's really accessible? Do you think that has, if you wanted to play that on a even vaguely competitive level online, do you think that's an easy game to get into?
Definitely compared to other fighting games, it's one of those weird things where there's very many tiers of competitive play, if that makes any sense. So I
Yeah,
think in
sure.
that way, it's actually more easy to get into than others, because if you're playing Street Fighter and you're not already kind of in that top group, there's not much option for you to kind of get out there and do stuff.
I disagree with that. I think there is certainly there's very clear tiers of like if we're going to use Street Fighter Five as an example because that's the game I have probably the most experience with. Yeah, there's one group of players who are anywhere from between rookie and bronze. There's one group of players who are anywhere from between silver
I'm
and
speaking
ultra
purely
silver.
on an outsider viewer for like watching tournaments and conventions and stuff.
Yeah, I'm just saying you can group people together in layers. I think I don't think there's really just you're either pro or you're not. Is what I was trying to say. So I suppose. Well, I mean, yeah, I think that the controls and the reason I never really got into Smash Bros was I found the idea of doing tilt moves to be very awkward. So I'm not sure how well that played with you or other. Obviously, a lot of people didn't have an issue with that, but that's another layer of complexity on top of things for a game like that. The thing that really we want to talk about here is that there's been two major developments, and these have both come from Capcom, which, as I said earlier, were driving accessibility in Street Fighter Cross Tekken. And the first one is that a new character came out just yesterday for Street Fighter V. Well, not officially, he's in the open beta. His name is Ed, and what makes Ed more accessible than a lot of other characters to play is that his special moves, do not require any kind of elaborate inputs. His special moves range from doing things like pressing two buttons at once to mashing one button, or to pressing a direction and then pressing another button afterwards is about as complicated as it gets for his special moves. So I suppose that's one thing. The other thing is that we're talking about Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. The news came out that they are adding what are essentially auto combos to the game, in that a player can just mash on one button in the game, and it will be able to deliver a fairly impressive combo. Not the longest combo you'll ever see in the entire game, but a fairly technical combo which would take several hours to learn if you would actually sit down in training mode and try and figure it out. You can just mash light and get a launcher and a knockdown and an off the ground, another launcher into something to finish the combo off. And there's no downside to doing things this way, aside from the fact that it's not the most elaborate combo you can do. There's no penalty to damage, there's no penalty to meter gain, there's nothing else. You can just woof on one button and get a pretty reasonable combo. And a lot of people
because ultimately
like that.
I think then it ultimately just turns into a button mash.
For one, granted, it's only the one combo. It's not going to be mixing things up or anything else like that. So, if you're a player who wants to go to training mode and learn how to do, mix-ups or frame traps or anything else like that, obviously you'll have an advantage. But at least initially, it's allowing players to get into the game quite easily just by woofing on one button.
Does that...
I suppose my question is to you... Well, my question to you, Naman, is that do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this is the direction that all fighting games should go down? Do you think that your Smash Brothers or your Street Fighter or your Marvel or anyone else should really embrace this in order to increase the player base of their groups?
I'm not really sure, because ultimately then what is the player learning about the game if you're just mashing the button?
Well, as I said, fighting games have, and I'm playing devil's advocate here because I'm not really a fan of it either. But let's look at the obvious thing. As I said, fighting games have a precipitously high learning curve. Essentially, the hardest time I think you'll have is getting over that initial hump of just learning how to play the fucking game. Once you learn how to play the fucking game, a lot of things start to make sense to you, even if you are slow to absorb them or learn them. You'll at least understand what's going on. Whereas if you've never played a fighting game, sit down and play it and resist the urge to just mash on all buttons is very hard to avoid. And when you get beaten up by someone who does clearly know what they're doing, that can be very off-putting.
Yes, but at the same time, if all you're doing is just bashing the button and getting combos out, then what are you learning about the game or kind of the genre in general?
Well, here's the thing, though. Didn't we all start out like that, though?
Yes, but at the same time... at the same time, we still had...
Yes, but...
we still had, if we wanted to get better at the game, we still had to sit down and actually learn it, not just, press the button multiple times and it does that combo, so now I don't need to learn how that combo works.
Yeah. I mean, I started out in fighting games playing Street Fighter 2, which is immediately dating myself, but I did. That was the first fighting game that I ever played, and the only button I used in that game was heavy kick. I did jumping, heavy kick, and sweep, and that was it. That was all I needed. And that works against the CPU great. It will never work against a real person. But I suppose the thing is, though, is that that's just me mashing on one button, and thankfully, or perhaps to my detriment, I never know. Maybe I would have had a much better social life. I don't know. But thankfully for me, that was enough to kind of get me into the game and convince me to push forward and learn more.
Yeah, and as a result,
if people don't have that, they may not have the urge to keep going and try and dig deeper when they could have had the potential to become a good player, but they couldn't get over that initial hump.
Yeah, I've kind of done this on Twitter for a different franchise, kind of genre and franchise, but then I kind of have to bring it up here, and is that well, we grew up without it and we turned out just fine, sort of thing. It's one of those...
Yeah.
I understand why it helps, and I understand why it'd be good for casual play, but if the idea is to get more people into the genre in general, what is this teaching them about it? What is making them interested? Because if then, as you say, I'm going to try to get better at this game, but all I know how to do is smash the button for this one combo, it hasn't taught them anything. It hasn't taught them anything.
Well, let's use a different genre as an example. Have you... I don't actually know this. Are you a fan of Dark Souls?
I've seen plenty of gameplay footage, yes.
But you've never actually played it yourself. Alright, well, my personal experience with Dark Souls is that I fucking hated it. For a very long time, I fucking hated Dark Souls because I play games to enjoy myself, not to tear my hair out. And Dre, my friend, tried to get me into them on many different occasions, and he failed every single time. And so it wasn't until Bloodborne came out, and I bought all of them. I bought Dark Souls, I bought Dark Souls 2, I bought Bloodborne. Didn't play them more than beyond the first hour because I just couldn't get over that initial hump. But once I actually sat down by myself and did get over that initial hump, I found out that I fucking love the game. And it's really trying to just get past that part of the game where you have to learn the mechanics and understand how it's supposed to be played to be able to actually enjoy it and find it rewarding instead of frustrating. And now there's been the argument made many, many times over I think most prominently by Jimquisition, with Jim Sterling, that Dark Souls should have an easy mode because that would help people get into the game and get over that hump. Because I've tried to loan my copy of Bloodborne to other people, and they just come back to me and said, I can't fucking do this. I'm fucking dying. I want to throw my controller across the room. And so forth. And the same thing that everyone else has experienced. And on the one hand, you do have the people go, yeah, an easy mode would help people get into the game. It would help to, to understand those mechanics of how you're supposed to play the game. But then you have the other people who, as you say, go, well, we didn't have it, and we figured it out. We got good. Again, does Dark Souls, because an easy mode wouldn't affect how Dark Souls play at the end of the day. It would just be a person
and I think
the
the main difference here is that Dark Souls is a single player game, so there's nothing inherently wrong. Well, mostly.
But there is
that's why I said inherently. So buff some items, decrease enemy health, what have you, and make an easy mode. That's fine. Fighting games are inherently competitive, though. You can't make an easy mode for a tournament for a supposedly weaker fighter against a more veteran experience. The only option they have is...
And I suppose that's really the question. That's really the question. I think that's the crux of it that you just illustrated there. Is having a one-button combo going to put a newbie player on the same level as a more competent player without the effort that the competent player had to put into the
answer for me is going to be probably not, which makes me question why have it at all other than enjoyable casual play, which is fine. But I don't think it's going to be, we're going to bring lots of more people into the fighting game scene like they're hoping it'll be.
You don't feel it'll be a selling point? Why not?
Because ultimately, if you're interested in fighting games as a genre, you're probably already interested. It'll help casual players, but no one's going to pick this up and say, oh, I like this, I'm going to start to get better at it. Because, again, as I said, it doesn't teach you about the game.
Well, that's not true. A casual player could become a devoted player if they actually enjoyed it enough.
I would say that's a very small amount of people that would actually do that based on a button mash combo system.
Fair enough. All right, well, I think we've probably beaten that enough. Was there anything else that you had to discuss? Any other points that we've talked about here that you feel are noteworthy of mentioning?
Not that I can immediately think of. It's kind of the quiet before the storm because E3's in a few weeks.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, well, that's going to do it for us now, guys. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for donating, because Nairman really appreciates your support. I don't give a shit because I don't get paid. But he certainly does, so that's the important thing, because... Also true. So, that's it for me, guys. If you enjoyed the sound of my voice, I don't know why you would, but if you did, there'll probably be... there better be a link below. That's the least you can do, right? You can put a link below for me. There'll be a link in the description below for my YouTube channel where I cover a lot of fighting games if you haven't checked that out already, so please do. Obviously, you love Nairman, that's the main reason why you're here, that's why you're giving him your money. You can know where to follow him, but if they don't know where to follow you, Nairman, where could they do that? If there's just a place where you've appeared, are you on Snapchat? Are you on Instagram? Are you on Flickr? Are you on any Periscope? What are you doing?
I'm on Twitter and Brain Scratch, that's about it.
Thanks very much, guys. Kisses, hugs, belly rubs. We will see you.
Later, everyone, for whenever we get to episode 3.